In chess, people always talk about developing your pieces, castling your king, and controlling the center, but many forget that you also have to think prophylactically and prevent the opponent's plans. In this video, I go through 4 unique ideas on how you can level up your positional understanding by learning how to restrict enemy piece movement. Let's first talk about the knight. When your opponent has a knight on g3, you can play g6 to restrict the knight's movement. Then, you can start pushing the h-pawn to harass the knight. This also works on the queen side, except this time you go b6 a5. This theme can be found in the Italian, Roy Lopez, SKYROCKET and many other openings. In this game between Botvinnik and Boleslavsky, white restricts black's g6 knight by playing g3 and then immediately follows up with h4. A couple of moves later, the knight is forced back and Botvinnik gains control over the 7th rank, leading to a completely winning position. Okay, but what if the knight isn't on g3 or b3? For example, in this King's Indian, white has exchanged the queens and would like a knight on d5. Thankfully, our pawn is on c7 and we can go c6 to restrict the knight's movement. However, white has a pawn on c4, meaning we can put our knight on d4 without being harassed. Okay, that's cool, but what about bishops? Against a fianchettoed bishop, you want to put up a pawn chain facing towards it. This way, it becomes as good as a sniper staring into a brick wall. Okay, but what if it's not fianchettoed? Okay, now it's getting a little bit more complicated. When a bishop is passive, meaning it's behind its own pawn chain, we want to fixate the opponent's pawns to be on the same color as the bishop. We do this by closing the position and putting all our pawns on the opposite color. In this game between Magnus Carlsen and Richard Rapport, Rapport went for the French and Magnus forced him to put all of his pawns on light squares. Now, let's take a look at Rapport's light square bishop for a moment. It comes to a point when Magnus is a piece down, but he's still better because the bishop is basically only a big pawn. But what if the bishop is already outside the pawn chain? Against an active bishop we want to do the opposite by putting all our pawns on the same color as the bishop. For example, in this variation of Taimanov, white has an active dark square bishop and a passive light square one. To restrict them as much as possible, we force their active bishop back and then put all our pawns on black. As we can see, white has a lot of trouble finding pawn breaks. Their bishops are just terrible. Okay, these ideas are really cool, but how will I remember to implement them in my games? You won't. And that's why you have to hardwire them into your brain, so you will start finding these patterns subconsciously. Okay, but how do I do that? Simple. You need to solve exercises regarding these positional concepts, and then you'll start finding them in your games. Okay, but what if I don't have any book on this subject? Truthfully, there's not really any websites that give out these types of things for free. But I've put a couple of exercises on these themes in a Leecher study. You can find a link in the pinned comment.